right, y'all. Welcome back in to another Biscuits and SEC live show. It is Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central, and we are live. Shout out to Rick and Bonnie checking in. Roll Tide from Huntsville, Alabama. We appreciate y'all tuning in as always. Before we hop in, just a few housekeeping items per usual. Sign up for the newsletter below. Bossman sent it out this morning with some good tidbits about recruiting, some of the house settlement unrest. I'm not exactly sure what to call it at the moment, but some good intel there that is sent out currently weekly every Wednesday. During the season, we up it to twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. It's free, of course. So please consider signing up for that, subscribing to the YouTube channel. We're trying to grow this and pump this up before the season starts. So for those of you that have been here all off season, we appreciate it. We've got our friend Mike Huseman tuning in as well. South Carolina Gamecock fan and alum. So appreciate him. Also go check out Mike's new show, Off Season After Dark, on the After Dark YouTube channel, which we are on as well. He does an excellent job, super in the weeds on really all the Power 5 and Power 4. Like it's called Off Season After Dark because he digs way into coaching and transfer portal and things of that nature. So if you really want to get an in-depth look at a certain conference, I know he did the ACC either earlier this week or last week. So definitely worth checking out Mike there. All right. This is our 40th show. So again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. After that rambling intro, I think we can hop in. Bossman, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's good to see everybody. Thank you guys for joining us as always. Just a couple things, Hammer, to get to just quickly. One is that Hammer mentioned the newsletter, Morning Biscuits newsletter. I got it out this morning. I finally got smart and put it in the description. So if you're on YouTube and checking us out, all you got to do is scroll just a second, click on that link, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter, as you can see there on the Cryon. But you can also click that link in the description and go sign up right now. It's going to take you 2 seconds. We don't ask you for a ton of information, just your name and your email, and it's free to sign up. So please go check that out. And then also wanted to shout out Mike. Mike, I watched your ACC Off-Season After Dark show from the other day, and had Alec, I'm going to say his name wrong, but I'm trying, Alec Netterveld, I think I said it right, the Syracuse beat writer. And it was a great show, man. So ACC, they got into the ACC, what's going on at Syracuse, some of the rankings for the coaches that Athlon put out. So if you guys haven't checked out Off Season After Dark yet, definitely go check out Mike's show for sure on the After Dark Network. So anyway, I'm excited to get into it tonight. We've been going through these over-unders now for 2 weeks. This is part 3 of our over-under series. We got some interesting teams tonight. We're going through South Carolina, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and Auburn. So it should be fun to get into it. So we've talked about a lot of the upper echelon teams in the SEC. Now we're getting kind of into the middle and into the meat. So who can rise up from that, and who's maybe going to fall, or who's maybe going to stand pat, potentially maybe a Kentucky. So looking forward to getting into that, and then also a little bit to talk about on the recruiting trail as well. So it's going to be a fun show.
Absolutely. And on that, just one more plug for our buddy Mike. Syracuse, who I believe Alec is a fan of, goes to, I can't remember. But anyway, they had a great Syracuse preview, and Syracuse opened Tennessee. So all you Volunteer fans out there, that's not news to you. Y'all know your schedule, but worthwhile to get a little bit of intel on the Orangemen, the Fighting Orange. I'm not 100% sure what they go by. The Orangemen, I think.
Just the orange.
The orange. But anyway, let's hop into recruiting. I think we kind of tease this with a little bit of an Auburn angle, but there's some more probably to get to as well. As Rick points out here, Bama has been hot. Our alma mater, A&M, has also been quite hot this past week. So just a bit of a primer here. Again, I don't think this is news to our viewers, especially y'all tuning in on July 2nd in the offseason. But, 2026 recruiting is like now. It's happening now. Kids are taking visits. They're committing. I also saw our friend Hayes Fawcett, the graphic guru, has began putting out graphics when kids, quote, shut their recruitment down. So I guess we just have to graphic everything. We have to get a graphic for the final 6, 8, 3, whatever schools. And then you need a graphic for when you actually commit. And then you need a graphic for when you officially shut your recruitment down after committing. So anyway, that's a whole other conversation, the graphic side of this charade. But recruiting is, with the early signing period, it very much takes place now, spring, when they're able to get guys on campus, and then summer, basically, because most of these kids want to know where they're going before the season starts. That way they can focus on their high school season. The coaching staffs can focus on the actual season. Obviously, there will be very big official visit weeks during the year when they have kids on campus. But nowadays, a lot of those kids attending the official visits for a game are committed, right? They've already committed. They're just coming to see. There's not a ton of movement once the season gets going, aside from flips, which we know happen at the deadline of whether it was the February signing day or now the December one. But generally speaking, your class is really starting to take shape right now, which brings us to Auburn that we teased, because the Tigers, I think, as of recording, have the 89th ranked, 89th, I believe, ranked recruiting class in 247. As you pointed out in the newsletter this morning, behind powerhouses San Jose State and Louisiana. So interesting, I guess, turn, because since Hugh Freeze got there, Auburn has recruited quite well. They secured the number 10 overall class in 2024, his first, full cycle, I guess, not even really full anymore, but his first real cycle. And then the number 8 class in 2025. So back-to-back top 10 classes. Yet here we are, in July, when teams are nailing down their class. I mean, just looking at it right now, in terms of, nailing down a class, again, this is all fairly fluid, but the number 1 class is Southern Cal. They have 30 commits. Georgia, number 2, 26. A&M and Notre Dame, both with 22. So these classes are filling up fast. Again, there will be some shifting, but they're kind of full, and Auburn is not even on the reservation. What are your thoughts here? What do you think's going on? What's happening?
I kind of don't know where to start with it. There's a lot of different ways you can go. The first is to mention that there's been at least 3 high-level recruits, 4-star type recruits, who have flipped their commitments within the last week or so, from the Auburn class to other classes. And so that one of them was a big linebacker, Shadarius Toole. And then there was another, I think, wide receiver as well that flipped his commitment maybe yesterday or something like that. I'm trying to find the graphic to remember, but I'm not having much luck. But anyway, I know for sure Shadarius Toole, a prized linebacker in that class. They were very excited about it. He flipped his commitment. And then also the wide receiver that I mentioned flipped his commitment. And I know there was another kid as well who flipped his commitment. So they're losing steam, losing momentum in that class. And right now, I mean, this is entering like Brian Harsin territory in terms of the worry of this recruiting class. I missed it. I was looking something up, but you started going through the years under Hugh Freeze and how they've recruited, and they've recruited very well. Just last year, they had the 8th best class in the country, according to 247. So, I mean, and everybody's super excited about that class, as they should have been. I mean, it had, 2 5-star wide receivers. That was a loaded class. And they're now excited that those guys are on campus. I expect, some of those guys to really show out this year. Cam Coleman, right, in year 2. especially. But I think there's a multitude of things going on here, none of which are great. Now, one thing I'll say, too, in the newsletter this morning, I wrote and found a couple of sources. One of them was CBS Sports, and CBS Sports put out a panic meter of, okay, there's like 10 teams that we're going to go through. Some of these are having real struggles in recruiting for the 2026 cycle. Let's examine a little bit of what's going on and how panicked should the fan bases be. The first team that they looked at, first school, was Auburn. And Auburn was a 1 to 5 was the panic meter. They had Auburn at a 4. And I think that's about right. I mean, you just outlined it, right? There are 22, commits for whoever. There's 30 commits for these teams that are in the top 10 are crossing over 20 commits easily right now, and Auburn's nowhere near that. 89th is absolutely crazy for a school of Auburn's caliber. 85th is South Alabama. 84th is Nevada. The Idaho Vandals are at 83. Tulsa is at 82. Like, what is going on? And the message board geniuses today, some of the Auburn faithful are a little bit worried about how much time that Hugh is spending on the golf course. Apparently there's some inside information that he's been on the course for 10 out of 20 days. Up to 20 days in June, he had been on the course for 10 days. Who knows if that's true or not? It's also the off season. If the guy wants to play golf, he can play golf. But people start to take notice if your class is 89th in the country at this point in the cycle. So I think that's a piece of it. I also think that, they're getting recruited against in terms of what they've put out, right? They haven't won a bowl game since 2018. It's been a mess since Gus Malzahn got canned. And not only that, but you've gone through Harsin, you fired him. Now you're in Hugh Freeze, year 3 now going into Hugh Freeze. And frankly, like, we haven't seen it. It hasn't been up to snuff of what Auburn fans expected. I think they expected to be in a much better place after year 2 than what they ended up, which we'll get into a little bit later, going to, the outlook on 2025 with the over-under. But I think that they're starting to get really recruited against, and there's a good case to be made that, like, in fact, an Alabama writer put out an article the other day saying, look, if you're talking in terms of NFL draft potential and developing players, Auburn's only sent like 25 players to the draft. In the same span, Alabama has sent over 50. And there's other schools that could say the same thing. There's also talk about potentially NIL dollars that are drying up around the Auburn program. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just a rumor. Wouldn't surprise me, considering some of these flips that we're seeing. It sounds like some bags are being thrown at these kids, and Auburn's not matching it. It wouldn't surprise me at all. The final thing I would say on it is, we all know Hugh Freeze has cancer, and that's awful. I pray for him. I really hope that he is able to recover and make a full recovery and go into remission and be cancer-free. At the same time, that's something that schools are probably talking about. It's just the truth of the matter. You go into a kid's living room and you say, hey, he is very focused on his health. He's got to get better, and he has cancer right now. And we are trying to, build a team, and we've got a coach who has been here for XYZ years. We've got DeBoer, who's been here for 2 years. He's shown it at Washington. He's been to the playoff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on down the line. It's just the truth. I don't even think schools have to say it, right? People just know. Hugh Freeze is dealing with a serious medical condition right now that he needs to deal with. And that just makes it difficult to coach and difficult to be on top of your game. And so I think that's in part a little bit of what we're seeing. So I think it's an amalgamation of all these things that are coming together into this sort of perfect storm for Auburn to be at 89th. And I said that was the final thing I'll say. This is the last little point I'll make. If you start winning and you start racking up wins, you're going to start racking up flips. You're going to start racking up recruits and commits. So there's still time for them to make this up. However, they got to get to work fast, and they got to start winning games as soon as August, as soon as the calendar turns to August and into September.
Yeah, that's a good point about Hugh Freeze's battle with cancer. Obviously, as you said, terrible story, but it's an unfortunate reality of just nature of the business, right? Whether it's him, personally just not having the time, which of course is understandable, or the negative recruiting that, like you said, you don't even really have to say, but just these kids want stability, and unfortunately there's some instability or things that are potentially up in the air at Auburn right now, which is nobody's fault, but just the truth. So whether it's he doesn't have the time or he's being negatively recruited against, or a combination of the two, hard to say. But obviously, yes, prayers go out to Freeze and his family, and hopefully he's back to 100% as soon as he can be. One more quick rundown on this. I think you're definitely right, where if you start winning games, you will get flips. I just worry that having a good season, and we'll get into what that looks like on the show with the Auburn over and under totals, but I still think you're just going to be a little bit late. So even if you have a good year and you do get some flips, you're so far behind the 8 ball right now with 6 commits in your class. It would be like if they finish in the top 25, that would be a very good close for where they stand now. So it's going to be interesting to see, even if they win games, how many flips can they get? How much can they improve that class? And one thing I wanted to point out too, just because we know Auburn, as does any program in the SEC, but primarily Auburn, compares themselves to Alabama. That's the measuring stick. And as Rick and Bonnie have pointed out here, DeBoer has been on fire. So just to juxtapose this, if I could say the word, with Auburn, in the last week, Alabama has locked down 1, 2, 3, 4 top 100 recruits. They secured a commitment from a 5-star edge, Xavier Griffin, 5-star wide receiver, Sadarian Morgan, a 4-star listed as an athlete. He's 6'5", 230. So probably, tight end, D end, somewhere in there, but Max Sutter. And then a Xavier Crowell, a running back. So Alabama, within the last week, has gotten 4 top 100 commits. Auburn has 6 total commits in their entire class. So again, a lot of things at play here, but just absolutely something to monitor when you're talking about Auburn. Obviously, we're going to talk about them on the show, but just this is a big year for Hugh Freeze. He's I think it's right at 500, if I remember correctly, in his 2 years at Auburn, which is not good enough at all. So he has a big season incoming, and frankly, a lot of Freeze's goodwill within the Auburn fan base and the optimism that he has generated is all due to recruiting, because Harsin was not winning on the field and not recruiting, and that got him run out in less than 2 seasons. Freeze is not winning on the field, but has been recruiting well. So if that dries up and they have a bad season on the field, you just don't know where things could head, but very much so something to keep an eye on.
Agreed. So a couple things on the Auburn front, and then I have a couple things to say about just overall generally recruiting, about what's going on in the SEC and around the country before we get into our over-unders, because I know that takes a lot of our time. But yes, 4 out of 5, I'm with CBS on the panic meter. I'm with you. Like, hey, the hour is late. Like the cycle is happening now. You are way behind the 8 ball in terms of the cycle. But there's a couple things to remember. One is that folks may not know this. This really just came out I think it was yesterday, that with the House settlement and kind of everything that shook out of that, there's going to be a one-time transfer portal window that opens on July 7th. So you've got a July 7th. It's only like 10 or 12 days, something like that. You have to check me and look at that. But there's going to be a transfer portal window in July. I wouldn't be surprised to see Auburn stuff it, right, because of what they're seeing in recruiting. So that's one. You also got the transfer portal. There's going to be another window, right, at the end of the season. So they're probably going to supplement a lot with the transfer portal if this class ends up being, low in numbers. So there's still hope there, right? Like Auburn has shown they've gotten good players out of the portal before and players who have produced. I always mess his name up, but the Penn State wide receiver who came in last year, played very well, right?
Lambert Smith, yeah.
Smith. So I'm very worried if I'm an Auburn fan. However, there is some hope. There's a sliver of hope. Just keep the faith, and maybe it'll work out. The final thing on the Auburn piece, I frankly know this is a cutthroat business. Recruiting is super, super cutthroat. We understand the college football completely cutthroat business. There's snakes and scallywags and pirates everywhere you look, right around every corner. But I frankly don't think that it stoops to the level of, hey, this guy's got cancer. I don't know. And just like, I doubt that teams are really doing that, frankly.
Right.
I think it's just recruits that are looking at the reality of the situation, which I'm not even talking about the worst possible scenario here, which we all, of course, do not want. And we want him to get better. But I'm really just talking about there could be it's instability. That's the word that you said, instability here. And it could end up being a retirement, right? Maybe he retires at the end of next year, or maybe he retires in 2 years. Like, I might be on campus for 3 years. I don't know. I don't know if this coach is going to be there. And that also comes down to it too, because Hugh Freeze is such a family man. He has a wonderful family who he is very open about, that he's very committed to and that he loves. And so it could be a situation where at the end of the day, it's too much overall, and he's got to go and focus on his health and his family at the end of the day, which would be totally understandable. So I think it's just recruits and their families kind of looking at the total reality of the situation and thinking, hey, I might love Auburn, but at the end of the day, I kind of need a place for stability and a place to grow and a place where I can develop into a potential NFL talent. And there may be other options out there that just afford me that opportunity in a better way than I'm seeing at Auburn right now. So okay, thank you, Jake. Jake Thomas there from Tide Talk Live also joins us on the SEC After Dark on Thursdays. July 7th through August 5th is that transfer portal window. That is this. It's one time, only going to be this year, just because of the House settlement and the way that roster numbers are now going to have to shake out because of that. Okay, now quickly moving over to overall in general recruiting of what's going on nationally. I'm a little bit surprised, frankly. I mean, typically when we're looking at these recruiting rankings, we're looking at the SEC just filling out the top 10, right? You're talking about 6 out of the top 10 teams being from the SEC. This year, at least to this point, could change because there's a couple teams that are knocking on the door here, and I think it probably will change. But at this moment right now, you've only got, I believe it was 4. No, it was only 3. So you've got Georgia at number 2. You've got Texas A&M at number 4. Mike Elko is cleaning up right now. You mentioned Alabama, how many recruits they just got in the past week and a half. A&M in the past week and a half, or excuse me, Georgia actually. Georgia in the past week and a half has gotten 8 commitments, most of those being 4 stars or above, which is extraordinarily impressive. A&M has been on a tear as well. The last 2 weeks, I didn't count it up, but they're in around Georgia territory. 6 to 8 different 4-star or above recruits that they've locked down all across the board, whether that's linebacker, offensive line, athlete, wide receiver, what have you. So very impressive what's going on in College Station. And then Kalen DeBoer, as we mentioned, he's been on a tear. So those 3 are the ones that are in the top 10. And then you have 4 that are knocking on the door. You got Tennessee at number 12, Texas at number 13, Florida at 14, and LSU there at 15. So those classes right now are 16 commits, 15 commits, 15 commits, 11 commits for LSU. So the fact that LSU has 11 commits and has the 15th best class in the country right now, I fully expect Brian Kelly and that staff to close on a couple and to jump into the top 10 here at some point. So if I had to guess, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think you do see a couple of these teams jump into the top 10. And at the end of the day, when all the dust settles, I think most likely you see six-ish of the top 10, again, be from the SEC signing, top 10 classes.
Yeah, I think you're right. But again, something to monitor for sure. It'll be interesting to see whether, because I think with NIL, the transfer portal, and now this house settlement going into effect, there's been a lot of change over the last 5 years with recruiting and the importance of it versus the portal, et cetera. And so, I don't know, maybe we could be seeing a new sort of reality where there's less of an emphasis on it, or even if, maybe some of the other parts of the country are just catching up. Maybe it's not that the SEC's putting less of an emphasis on it, but schools have money now. And now that they can pay above board, there's like, I'm looking at the 2026 class right now. Maryland, Houston, USC all have guys in the top 10. And that's, in my opinion, 100% attributed to NIL. Right, these kids are the Maryland kid and the Houston kid are local. The kid going to Maryland's from Baltimore, and the kid going to U of H is from Spring, a Houston suburb. So it's like, hey, I grew up down the road, and I can get a couple mil to go to the school that's 30 minutes away from where I grew up. Like, it doesn't sound too bad. So I think there's potentially some dynamics changing, but. Just again, something to keep an eye on as this develops throughout the fall.
Yeah, without a doubt. Stacy, sorry, didn't know it was you and not Jake, but appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're always glad to have you, especially because of all the little nuggets that you can add from Tuscaloosa and Tideland to keep us straight. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you tuning in, Stacy. He does great work on Tide Talk Live, and he's got a bunch of other podcasts, and he writes. So Stacy Blackwood on Twitter, give him a follow. All right, well, let's get into the over and unders as we are chugging along, and we'll probably go long tonight, but we'll see. So as we teased tonight, we're talking Auburn, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Kentucky. So you can see here last year's regular season numbers, and then the 2025 over and under. So Auburn at 7.5, South Carolina 7.5, OU 6.5, and Kentucky 4.5. So as you mentioned at the outset, we are kind of getting into the meat. It's actually interesting just looking at the overall over-unders across the SEC this year. And I think we saw this last year just with how the season played out. But, the top win total teams right now are sitting at 9.5. So nobody's really quite sure who the top dog is. There's 3 teams sitting at 9.5. And then you get to kind of where we're at now, where there's a couple 8.5s, a bunch of 7.5s, a bunch of 6.5s, et cetera. So, just something interesting and exciting, really, to emphasize that hopefully there's some parity here, and these games will be competitive. So we'll get us kicked off with Auburn. Might as well. We've been talking about them most of the show. So here is their 2025 schedule. They open at Baylor in Waco at McLean Stadium. Tough game to start out. Baylor was surging at the end of last year. They brought their quarterback, I think it's Sawyer Robertson back, who's pretty talented. I think a lot of teams went after him in the portal, and Baylor ponied up to keep him. So Baylor's pretty dangerous, especially on the road. Don't really know what to expect from Auburn in week 1, but tough opener. Then they host, I want to say that's Ball State, but I know that's wrong. Yep. It is Ball State.
Ball State, yep.
And then they host South Alabama, go on the road to Oklahoma, then on the road at A&M. Then they get a bye week before hosting Georgia, host Mizzou the following week. Then they travel to Arkansas, host Kentucky, go on the road at Vanderbilt, and then host Mercer and host Alabama to finish the season. So with all of that intro, what are your thoughts on a 7.5 over and under for Auburn this fall?
Well, my first thought as we were talking pre-show was, man, that seems high. That seems like a high line for Auburn this year by looking at their schedule. I'm going to put the graphic back up for just 1 second to look at it here. But I really think that, and I think this will probably be obvious to most people, but September 20th through October 11th, that to me is your season. You got that bye right there. That's very helpful as you go into the game against Georgia, which you get at home this year, which is nice. But obviously, it's Georgia, and it kind of doesn't matter if it's home or away. It's going to be an extraordinarily tough game, no matter where it is. But still nice to get them in Jordan-Hare. But that to me is your season right there, right? Okay, hey, say you get a win against Baylor, great. Then you probably get a win against Ball State, absolutely should. Then you should get a win against South Alabama. Okay, great. 3-0 going into Oklahoma, A&M, and Georgia. Oklahoma, most, including myself, expect Oklahoma to be saltier this year and good with John Mateer. A&M should be salty. You get both of those away, right? That's difficult. And then you get Georgia. So those 3 games to me kind of make or break your season. I think you have to at least get one of those and feel like you're gaining some momentum because then you have very winnable games after that. However, if you go 0-3 in that stretch, and then you have to go Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt, and we all know Diego Pavia owns the state of Alabama, and he especially owns Hugh Freeze. He even did that when he was at New Mexico State. So that's not a gimme game. That one's in Nashville this year. Mizzou, back-to-back 10-win seasons, not going to be easy to get a win there. Arkansas could be feisty, and Alabama to end the year, which you get that one at home this year, which is nice. But if you come off of the Georgia game and you've gone 0-3 in that stretch, Georgia's going to beat you around physically. It's going to be very difficult to be able to come back from that game. Any team that plays Georgia, that's how it is. It's physical, and the next week is going to be difficult. So if you come out of that stretch 0-3 there, it's going to be tough. And I'm going to go under. I think Auburn goes under 7.5. I think best case scenario, they get to 7. And I could absolutely see a 6-6 scenario here as well.
Yeah, I struggled with this one, honestly. And as Stacy points out, just a weird team because, last year when you look at what they did and where they ended up at 5-7, they, coulda, shoulda, woulda is a theme that every fan base at the end of the year screams and says if we had done this or that. But Auburn truly blew some games. I mean, people forget the pick 6 that they threw to Oklahoma in Jordan-Hare when they were up 10. They were up double digits in the 4th, lose that game. They were up all day on Missouri. Brady Cook goes to the hospital, somehow comes back and leads Mizzou to beat them. So there was a lot of games that Auburn statistically was the better team and ended up losing. So they can clean some of that up. You would expect them to improve. But I don't know. I think I'm going to go under too, because I think I just need to see it. I think the potential is there for them to win, 9 games, let's say, especially if Jackson Arnold pans out. But I'm not totally sold on him. I think he will be solid, but I'm not ready to, put him in any sort of upper echelon. Mm-hmm. I think their receiving core is really, really good. With a couple of the transfers, they got the kid Fields from Wake, and they brought in the Georgia Tech transfer. I can't recall his name now. And then, of course, Cam Coleman is back, and he had 8 touchdowns as a freshman. So they have a lot of weapons, and their defense is always solid. They had a solid defense last year. I expect them to be this year. I'm not totally sold on the Hugh Freeze experiment right now, and I think this is probably a 7-5 team. I mean, when I look at their schedule, I see, Ball State, South Alabama, Mercer obviously wins. There's 3. I will give them Vanderbilt, although that might be sacrilege, but I'll give them Vanderbilt. That's 4. I'll give them Kentucky at home. That's 5.
Yeah.
The other games I think are toss-ups or tilted in the other favor. I mean, at Oklahoma, at A&M, home against Georgia, home against Mizzou, at Arkansas, and then Bama. The idea that they're going to have, a 500 or winning record in that game, I'm not ready. Or in those games, excuse me, I'm not ready to commit to. So I think they are improved over last year ultimately, and probably end up around 7-5. But getting to 8 wins, I'm not convinced they're going to do that. So I'll go under there too.
There's 2 things I think to mention here. One is this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Auburn's recruiting and kind of everything that is going on around that program right now. There's now a lot of pressure on the shoulders of Jackson Arnold, right? Like there was already a lot of pressure on him coming in. He's a former 5-star, did live up to his billing at Oklahoma. All right, now like personally, he's trying to prove it to everybody now, right? But also now with everything surrounding the program, with what's going on in recruiting, and hey, oh man, there's headwinds against Auburn right now. A lot of pressure on Jackson Arnold to perform right away, right? Within the first 6 weeks, he's got to be on his game. The second thing I'll say about it is I struggle with it as well, because even with all the stuff we talked about, issues of recruiting, the stuff surrounding the program, blah, 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 new faces, new quarterback breaking them in. This is the best roster that Auburn has had in a long time.
Yeah.
They're talented. They definitely have talent, especially with that recent class that we talked about earlier that came in 2025. That class was loaded. Top 10 class, number 8 class in the country, according to 247. So this team, while young, it's the most talented team that Auburn has had in a very long time. So actually, like Stacy says here, they could get hot, win a couple of games. They could also, the train could fall off the tracks, especially in that 3-game stretch, right, that we mentioned earlier with Oklahoma, A&M, and Georgia. If they don't get through that with at least one, I could certainly see a situation where the train falls off the tracks, especially with a young team, right? Very talented, but young. With young teams, a lot of times what happens is they're not tested by the fire, right? They haven't been through it just yet. And so when stuff starts to spiral, those teams, those locker rooms tend to spiral if you don't have a strong leader at the top, and especially a strong leader who's on the roster. So again, Jackson Arnold, a lot of pressure going into 2025 this season in order to perform.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of how their entire season shakes out, and in terms of people that are betting on this number, Week 1 at Baylor is massive. I mean, they have to win that game. If they're going to hit the over, they beat Baylor. If they don't beat Baylor, I just don't see how they claw their way back into it. So
I agree. I expect a dogfight in that game.
I did too. Yeah. I absolutely do. If that game was in Jordan-Hare, I'd feel pretty confident that Auburn could get it done. But going on the road Week 1, man, you'd never know.
Never know. That's right.
Well, good stuff. So we're both under on the Auburn Tigers at 7.5. Where do you want to go next?
What we got? Let's go Oklahoma, since Oklahoma's there on that Auburn schedule.
Cool. So Oklahoma.
That's South Carolina.
That is South Carolina. Oklahoma. Over under 6.5 this year. Last year they were 6-6, 2-6 in conference. So Vegas is basically thinking they are right around the same team, or perhaps a game better if you're on the over. But the Sooners open up with Illinois State. Had to search high and far for that graphic at home, of course. Then they host Michigan Week 2, which should be a great game. Then they really strangely go on the road at Temple, which makes no sense, before settling in back at home against Auburn. Then they get a bye, and then they have a kind of a strange October out-of-conference game hosting Kent State before they really get to the meat of the schedule with the Red River Shootout, of course, against Texas. Then they go on the road at South Carolina. They host Ole Miss, go on the road at Tennessee. Then they get a bye. Then they are on the road at Alabama, host Missouri, and host LSU to close out the season. So can Oklahoma get to 7 wins, or do we see another pretty lackluster, 6-6 style season from Brent Venables and the Sooners?
I think I'm going to go over. I think that this is going to be an improved Oklahoma team. And I think that, based on that schedule there, Michigan in week 2, big game, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned the Baylor game for Auburn in week 1, how big of a game that is for them in order to hit their over. Could be the same here for Oklahoma in week 2 with Michigan. Definitely not going to be an easy game. Michigan's going to be improved. And I think that's going to be Sharon Moore's first game back, I believe, from suspension.
Oh, I forgot about that suspension thing. Yeah.
So, that could play to their advantage, play to their favor. So that could be good. However, the bringing the schedule back up here for a second, you got tough games. Obviously, hey, that Auburn game means a lot too. You got to win that one. It's a tough schedule again, man. It was last year we were all talking about it. Florida and Oklahoma easily had the toughest schedules in the nation. It was just an absolute brutal bloodbath of a schedule. And we all know, right, everything just changed over and went from home or away, right? So whoever was home last year is now away. Whoever was away is now home. So again, for Oklahoma, a brutal schedule. South Carolina going to Williams-Brice Stadium, probably going to be a night game. That one's going to be tough. Ole Miss going to be tough. Tennessee going to be tough. Mizzou, you had Mizzou last year. You freaking had them, and you let it get away from you. LSU to end the year, going to be tough. Now, having said all that, I opened this by saying I think that they're going to hit the over of 6.5. I think they're going to get to 7, maybe potentially more this year. All the talk around John Mateer is that kid is really, really good. Right now, I'm choosing to buy that hype. I did not watch a whole lot of Washington State football, as I think most of our viewers probably did not either. But with all the talk surrounding him, everybody talking about how dadgum good this kid is, I'm choosing to believe it a little bit more. I think this roster is going to be improved. I think this team is going to be improved. I think Brent Venables is a good coach. I believe he's a good coach. He's been a good coach for a very long time. I think that defense is going to be improved since he is taking over play calling duties. And I think that margin on a couple of those games last year, thinking really like Missouri, is going to be able to get them over the hump. I think they're probably a better team than Auburn. And also, I'm looking at the schedule here as well, and you've got teams like Ole Miss. Hey, Ole Miss, based on what we're seeing on paper in the preseason, not going to be the firepower is not going to be as big as it was last year, at least looking at the roster right now. They're going to be a very good team, don't get me wrong, but there's question marks. Same thing with Tennessee. We don't know how good Tennessee is going to be without Nico. We're going to know a lot by the time that Oklahoma plays Tennessee on November 1st in Neyland. But going into the year, we got some question marks. So I think that's a winnable game too. I think that Oklahoma can get Missouri. I don't expect Missouri to win 10 games again this year. So with all the question marks with some of these teams, especially on the back half of their schedule, I tend to think that they're going to be able to get over that 6.5 mark and get to at least 7 wins. And I think that there's the potential for even more on that schedule. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I'm going to go over here too. And my main reasoning, you brought up one good point. I do think Venables is a pretty good coach. I think last year, as we've learned over time, right, there's a difference between being a good coach schematically and like on game day, or just like building a culture and getting your team ready to play or to play for you. And one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with, and Brent Venables was a great example of this last year, is hiring the right people. Yeah. Seth Luttrell was a complete disaster as an offensive coordinator hire. No offense to Luttrell, but they were awful from the jump. And they dealt with a lot of injuries, which played a huge role in that. But I think Arbuckle is a much better offensive coordinator. And so with Mateer and Arbuckle, I think the offense will at least be competent, which it was not a year ago. And again, adding to the incompetence, I mean, Luttrell was fired like 5 or 6 games into the season. So the second half of the season, they didn't even have their OC, right? They're working with, whoever. Let's promote our wideout coach or whatever to call plays till we get it done, because Venables is a defensive guy. He's not taking that over. So I think he's made a much better hire. I think Arbuckle is a good offensive coach. So at the very least, they will be solid offensively. I'm very worried about the offensive line, but I think, they can maneuver some ways around that. I'm not expecting a huge jump, but I think 7 to 8 wins is possible here. As you mentioned on the schedule, when you look at it, I don't know what to think about Michigan. I think Oklahoma's probably a better team, especially at home. I would lean Oklahoma there. Auburn, they get them at home. I'm going to lean Oklahoma, right? We just went under on on Auburn. So that's a game that I think they can probably win. The Red River shootouts, neutral, who knows? They have gotten their tails blown out the last couple seasons. So hopefully they at least can give Texas a game. And Texas is another team. They're replacing a lot. Are they talented? Absolutely. But they are replacing a ton. So they really start out the season with a lot of winnable games, although the teams are good. And then even the back half, as you mentioned, I mean, at South Carolina, very tough to win. But back home against Ole Miss, I don't know what to expect from Ole Miss. They're replacing a ton. Tennessee replacing a ton. Alabama on the road, they are not winning that game. So we can forget about that one. But Missouri, back at home. Missouri's replacing a ton too. So, and then LSU at home will be very challenging. But there's a lot of games in there where you look at it and say, yeah, Oklahoma could lose. But if Mateer pans out and if they, are just competent on offense, like they should be able to win some of these games. So I think they can get to 7, maybe 8 at the top end and kind of, get the Sooner schooner back on the right track. And, Venables can save his job. So I'll go over with the Sooners as well. Cool. Well, let's hop into I don't want to finish with Kentucky, so let's hop into Kentucky now.
Let's hit the Steer ad read and then go into them.
Oh, yeah, good call. I was going to totally blow by that. But we are brought to you by the Steer Agency. Football is all about strategy, just like winning in business. Whether you're dialing up the perfect play on Saturdays or looking to dominate public affairs, PR, digital marketing, you need a team that delivers results. That's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies that get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com today and take your brand to the next level. So appreciate those guys for the support. So Kentucky, as I said, let's dive into the Wildcats here. Really tough year in 2024 in the Bluegrass State, going 4-8 and 1-7 in conference. Vegas doesn't have a ton of faith in them this year as well, similar to Oklahoma. They've got them, basically right where they were last year, or if you like the over, get them to 5 wins. But that sits at 4.5. Schedule, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but certainly not easy. So the Wildcats open hosting Toledo, who they should beat, but just in case some of y'all forgot, Toledo beat Mississippi State in Starkville last year by 3 touchdowns, I think. So keep an eye on that one. Then they host Ole Miss after shocking the world in Oxford last fall. Then they get Eastern Michigan at home, bye week, heading into conference play. So then they'll travel to South Carolina. Then they go to Athens to play Georgia. Then another bye week before hosting Texas and then hosting Tennessee on October 25th. And then 5 games in November. So they play the beginning of November at Auburn. Then they host Florida. Then they host Tennessee Tech. They travel to Vanderbilt. And then they travel to Louisville in a heated and challenging out-of-conference game to close the year against what is with as long as Jeff Brom is there, I'm going to just assume blindly that Louisville is competent and will be a very, very tough team to beat on the road, especially for the likes of Kentucky. So with that schedule, And with the over under sitting at 4.5, what are your thoughts for Big Blue Nation?
I have no freaking idea.
Fair.
I really don't know. I mean, I really could go either way on this. My gut leans under, but this is what I'll say. Zach Calzada is a dragon slayer, and he's been balling out at Incarnate Word. He had some very good games at A&M when he was there, and had some tough games as well. But he did play very well at times. And if you go look at some of his highlights, the kid can spin the rock. And now he's a fifth year or whatever senior. And so, look, if he can get it figured out, maybe this team's got a shot. Hammer might have froze on us. It's all right. I'll keep powering through here. But so I'm looking at this schedule. You got 3 wins that you should have, no doubt about it, right? You've got Toledo, Eastern, and then you have Tennessee Tech. So there's your 3 wins right there, right?
Yep.
Now we got to get 2 more to get to the over. Are you beating Ole Miss? Maybe. I don't know. You played Georgia very close last year with Brock Vandegrift, and we all know how that experiment went pretty badly. So, maybe you can get Ole Miss. You played Georgia really close. That one's away now. That one's at Georgia this year. Probably not getting Georgia. I don't think you're getting Texas. Going to be tough to get Tennessee. But I do think that there are 2 more games that Kentucky could surprise and get somebody with. Where I struggle is with this roster. They lost a lot. They lost a lot to the transfer portal. You lost Barry and Brown to LSU. You lost Dane Key, your big wide receivers. So as we go into our 16-16 territory, in order to really, really deep dive into these programs and figure out what's going to happen in 2025. Absent of that, having not done that just yet, I don't know the full construction of Kentucky's roster, but based on the over-under at 4.5, which is taking into account last year as well as the roster of this year and the potential outlook, Vegas does not think their roster is very good. But that doesn't matter when you have Zach Calzada under center for you and being the leader in that locker room. So I'm going to go over for Kentucky here. They're going to get to 5 wins. I don't know how they're going to do it, but you got the 3 easy ones. They're going to get 2 more 5 wins. Don't clip this. I'm probably going to delete it right after.
I love it. Calzada, will always hold a special place in Aggie's hearts. So I wish him the best. I hope he does well.
Yeah.
At Kentucky, and I love the optimism of Kentucky getting to 5 wins. So Bossman's going over. I'm going to go under. So our first disagreement of the show.
Very fair.
Yeah, part of me hates this too. I know nobody has a lot of faith in Kentucky. However, Mark Stoops has kind of made a career out of proving the doubters wrong, and so I don't like betting against him with a win total this low. Of course, if we were up at 6.5 or something, then hammer the under. But Vegas knows what they're doing, right? So 4.5 seems pretty fair. I could see them getting to 5, certainly, maybe even 6 if they really surprise. But I'm going under here because, as you mentioned, the Mark Stoops that I just brought up there, who has made a living out of proving people wrong, has been sliding as of late, not just on the field, but off the field. And we've detailed that on the show, in the newsletter. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in Lexington with Stoops. I don't really know what's going on there. I don't know if he's got, the 2018 Mark Stoops still buried inside there that he can resurrect and get this team going. In terms of the actual roster, yes, I love Calzada. I think he's probably going to be turnover prone. I listened to the Bud Elliott Summer School on Kentucky the other day to get a little bit of a sense, and their 247 beat writer that was on the show was pretty optimistic about some position groups, namely offensive line, based on the transfers that they had brought in. I'm going to go the opposite direction and say if you're bringing in multiple guys on your offensive line to start, then your offensive line is not going to be that good. I just don't think it's realistic to bring in bodies and depth at that position and rebuild an offensive line. We really haven't seen it work for anybody. And so to expect that to be the case for Kentucky, I struggle to see. As you mentioned, I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to. They lost most of their weapons. And then just going back to the schedule real quick, there are winnable games on there, but I don't like the buys, right? So the buy, they get them both. First of all, they're both early, so they're going to have a heck of a close to the season with 7 consecutive games, but they also come before games that I don't think they're going to be able to win, even if there wasn't a bye, right? They have a bye week before they go to South Carolina. I just don't see them winning that game. And then they have a bye week before they host Texas. I don't see them winning that game. Like, I would much rather see a bye week going into the Florida game or the Tennessee game or the Vandy game, just something that I actually think they have a puncher's chance to win. And so the way that those bye weeks fall with the teams that they're playing afterwards and then having to close the season with 7 consecutive games lends me to taking the under here, unfortunately, betting against Stoops and our beloved Zach Calzada. So sorry to Big Blue Nation, but I'm going under at the 4.5.
Yeah, I think that's understandable. I will say here, just to quickly put it out there, that Kentucky did backfill a decent amount in the portal, did the best they could. They got a couple of 4-star wide receivers. They got True Edwards from Louisiana Tech. They got Hardly Gilmore, was a 3-star. Or excuse me, he left and went to Nebraska, not him. Kendrick Law, 4-star, came from Alabama.
From Bama, yeah.
And then you also had Troy Stellato, came from Clemson, and then they also brought in 4 offensive linemen. They lost 5 offensive linemen. I'm totally with you there. It's tough. Even if they're good, the offensive line is such a key piece to your team that needs to work in tandem, and they have to get a lot of work together.
Yeah.
The older offensive lines are always the ones that are the best in the country. And so that's going to be difficult. But one other thing to mention is that they really bolstered their defensive line. They got David Gusta, was a 4-star from Washington State. And they also got, I'm going to butcher his name, but McKeese Humphrey Grace, I think is how you say his name. He was one of the top defensive linemen in the portal coming from South Dakota. So bolstered the defensive line, and they got a couple others who were 3-stars. So, yeah, maybe people are sleeping on Kentucky. I don't know. I think that line is pretty fair. I could see an under, and I could see, them surprising a couple teams there because, again, some questions for those teams that are on that schedule.
Love it. All right. So, yeah, just to recap, I'm going under. Bossman is going over. And great comment by our friend Mike here that Calzada's mother doesn't think he's a good quarterback as Bossman does. So
I told him Calzada has heart.
He does have heart. He beat Bama on basically a busted up shoulder, and got his what was it?
21-38. Never forget.
Dislocated his shoulder, got it jerked back into place on the sideline, and then threw a dime to win. Anyway, let's close out here. We're about to run over time, so we'll get some free football talk going for you all. But closing out with the South Carolina Gamecocks.
You want me to intro this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Virginia Tech to start the year. You get them at home, which is nice. That's gonna be fun. That's an old Beamer ball rivalry right there, right? You got Frank Beamer, who was at Virginia Tech forever, built them into the power that they were during the Beamer years. Shane also coached at Virginia Tech for a bit and grew up in Blacksburg. So a lot of family ties there in that game. That's gonna be a really fun one to see. I don't know what time that game is at. I assume that's gonna be a night game in Williams-Brice. You have to. No, 3:00 ESPN. Okay. That's dumb. But anyway, so Virginia Tech start the year. Then you get South Carolina State Bulldogs. Got Vanderbilt. That's not going to be an easy game. You get Mizzou. You got to go to Columbia for that one, the other Columbia. Then you get September 27th against Kentucky. You get a bye, which is nice, before you get a revenge game against LSU. If you guys remember, that game was basically stolen from the Gamecocks by SEC officiating last year, late in the fourth quarter. South Carolina had a lead, got a pick six that was called back for a unnecessary roughness on a block on Garrett Nussmeier, and LSU went on to win that game. So that South Carolina fans especially, and I know that team especially, has that one circled. So nice to get a bye right before that one on October 11th. But that one's in Tiger Stadium this year, so that's going to be difficult. Then you get Oklahoma. You get Alabama, who you also had on the ropes last year. And then you go to Ole Miss. You get a bye before you have to go to Kyle Field and play Texas A&M. That game is slated right now. Looks like that's going to be either a noon or 1 p.m. Eastern kick at Kyle Field, which is nice. You would rather get the Aggies at 11 a.m. Central Time or noon Central Time than you would at night at Kyle Field. Then you're gonna play Coastal Carolina, and then you finish out, as always, with your in-state rival, the Clemson Tigers, on November 29th. So last year they were 9-3, 5-3 overall in the SEC. They're looking to build on that. They were on the cusp of the college football playoff last year. You got Lenora Sellers coming back. You got a lot of hype surrounding this program right now. Hammer, can they get over 7.5, or do you think they take a step back and go under?
Oh, gosh, this one was very tough. Very tough, because I really, really like Beamer as a coach. I think he's a great coach. He's done a very good job there. I think every single year they've beaten their preseason win total that he's been there, maybe except for one, but I think they have. And I like Lenora Sellers, of course. I mean, what's not to like about him? He's extremely talented and has the makings of a quarterback. He needs to take a big step to get to this point, but he has the makings of a quarterback that can put a team on his shoulders and will them to 9-10 wins, as he did last year with them going 9-3. And I've been waffling back and forth, but I'm going to just go with my gut, because that's what we're doing here to sort of make sure everybody knows we're on the same page. This is we're not really doing a deep dive on these teams. This is just like gut reaction over under. And earlier today on our run sheet, I put over. So we're going over. I thought I put under, but I put over. So we are going over. So let's spin this. But yeah, I think they get Virginia Tech week 1. We talked about this in the Vandy over under. I don't think the Hokies are going to be very good this year. Getting them at home, I like them there. They get Vanderbilt at home. Obviously, I like them there. South Carolina State. So we're at 3 wins. Kentucky at home, give me 4 wins. Coastal at home, give me 5 wins. And then we just got to get 3 more between at Missouri, at LSU, OU, Bama, and on the road at A&M and against Clemson. So what I like here is they, I trust Lenora Sellers and them to get to 8. Do I think they improve on a 9-3 record? No. And I think, obviously the over-under being set at 7.5 shows that Vegas is not betting on that either. But I really look at the schedule and I think at LSU, home versus Bama, at A&M, and then against Clemson are probably their 4 toughest games. Our resident Gamecock here, Mike, says that, Mizzou scares them, which is fair. However, I think Mizzou lost a lot. And I think South Carolina, although they lost a lot too, I think they had 5 picks in the NFL draft, several in the top 150 off of that defense. So there's a lot to replace for South Carolina, but I'm going to go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt, believing in Shane Beamer, although I prefaced this as if I was going to go under. But as I said, I'm going with the gut. What I put on the sheet earlier today was over. So yeah, I think they can get Missouri on the road. And I think between OU and Bama both being at home, let's just say they get one of those. And then A&M and Ole Miss being on the road, if they can split there, like they're right in it. So, and obviously the Clemson game at the end of the year is nice that it's at home. I really think Clemson's going to be a very good team this year and out for revenge since South Carolina got them a year ago. But Clemson could be a top 5 team, and they could be undefeated, but they could still lose in Williams-Brice. So I think South Carolina gets to 8-4 this year. If we're looking at, again, at that schedule, I think they probably lose Bama. They probably lose at LSU. And then between, Mizzou, Oklahoma, A&M, Ole Miss, and Clemson, let's say they go 3-2. So they're sitting at 8-4.
This is, look, all these are hard for the most part, but there's a couple, right, that rise to the top of being the most difficult to pick here on a gut reaction of over under. And I think South Carolina is one of those because there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of hype surrounding Lenora Sellers. There's a lot of hype surrounding Dylan Stewart for obvious reasons. Both of those guys should be at the top of the conference this year in terms of their position group. Well, then what do you have? Then what's behind that? They lost a lot in the transfer portal. How many weapons do they really have for Lenora Sellers? We all know has to improve as a passer. When I do my deep dive for the 16-16, I'll know a lot more.
Nick Harbor, that's your guy.
Nick Harbor, yeah, you got Nick Harbor, but he's also got to take a step up, right? We've seen some flashes,
big time,
but man, he's got to be the guy this year. He's got to have a Xavier Leggett type of year, and he's got to be that guy, that connection for Lenora Sellers. He's got to be that safety valve, and he can be that safety outlet because of his size and because of his talent. But we got to see it, So there's just a lot of question marks once you get underneath the surface of the top level talent that South Carolina has, and I just don't know how much more meat on the bone there is aside from those 3 players that we mentioned. I'm optimistic about this team for sure. I think that they can get to 8 wins here, but man, you got a meat grinder once you get to October 11th, and you have to go to LSU. Then you have Oklahoma, Alabama at home. Homecoming is what they made the Alabama game, which frankly I absolutely love that. That is ballsy.
Yeah, good for them.
Totally gutsy. So you get them at home, which is nice. But then you have Ole Miss, then you get the bye, then you got to go to A&M, and then you get Coastal, and then you got Clemson. So I'm going to go under here. I think that they take a slight step back, and I think they get to 7-5 this year. I just think that grinder of LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, 4 straight weeks, back to back to back to back. Then you get the bye week, and then you get A&M. And yeah, they can beat A&M. I certainly think they can. They obviously have shown that. However, if you look at the history of that rivalry, A&M had rivalry, right, for the Bonham Trophy.
Yeah.
Which nobody even knows where that is, but it's hiding out in a warehouse somewhere. But big rivalry game. But the history of that rivalry since A&M has gotten to the SEC, A&M has owned South Carolina. I think South Carolina has 1 win or maybe 2 total. I think last year might have been the first time they beat them since A&M.
2. They got us in the 5 and they got A&M in the 5-7 season.
That was you're right. That's the first.
They've won their last 2 in Columbia.
Yep. So 2 out of the last 3. But over the history of the rivalry, over the history of that game, A&M has really owned South Carolina. So, and you got to go to College Station for that one. So that's gonna be tough. As I mentioned, probably going to be an 11 a.m. Central kick or maybe 12 Central kick. So that's nice that you're going to get that game in a midday instead of getting it at night in Kyle Field. Thank you, Greg Sankey, for giving us that instead of giving us the reciprocal, because we always get night games at Williams-Brice, but we can't get a night game at Kyle Field for that game. I digress. That's a homer take. But I just look at this. I think that meat grinder there in the middle of the schedule, LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, by Texas A&M. I don't think you come out of that with a winning record. And so for that reason, I'm going to say that South Carolina goes under 7.5, and I think they hit 7 and 5 this year.
Totally fair. As I said before, I was really waffling on this one too. I think one thing as we kind of wrap this up to touch on, especially with respect to Auburn, Oklahoma, and South Carolina, picking these over-unders is so tough because you look up and down their schedule and you just go 6 to 8 of these games are toss-ups, right? And I expect most of them to play out that way on the field, just meaning that they're going to be close. And South Carolina had a lot of close games last year, some that they lost, some that they won, but I expect the same thing this year, right? Like I was saying, if they can go 3-2 against Clemson, A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma, then that will get me to my 8. But every single one of those games, as we're sitting here July 2nd, I think it's going to be a one-score game. So whoever makes the play late or doesn't have the costly turnover is probably going to win those games because as of now, before we've seen anybody line it up, like I just don't think there's a whole lot that separates those teams. And even, you could say the same about LSU. We've been talking about how they've got a lot of, hype this year, and obviously going to Tiger Stadium is a challenge, but I picked the under on LSU. They're 8.5 win total. So South Carolina could easily go in there and win. It's just, we don't know. So anyway, that's part of the fun of doing this, obviously, is to make fun of ourselves when all these picks inevitably go wrong, sure. Because I expect a lot of close games this year. Obviously Vegas does too. Again, the SEC leaders are at 9.5. So Vegas looks across the conference and says, we don't know who's great, right? Like we're not going to give, years gone by, Georgia and Bama were 10.5. Even sometimes 11.5, right? Like, hey, they're either going undefeated or they lose once. And so we'll see how it plays out. But at least according to Vegas, like the times have changed and there's a little bit more parity in this league. So, that brings a lot of fun, competitive matchups on Saturdays in the fall, which is what we love about it. So,
totally. And that's just quickly to mention, it's like that's what we've been talking about for a year or two now, which is the NIL and the transfer portal has really, evened things out. And we've seen that with like Georgia last year, right? Everybody's picking them probably to go undefeated, probably going to win the national championship, and then they struggle, right? They ended up 11-2, but they struggled through some of those games. Kentucky, you got to beat them 13-12, in Lexington. Like no one expected that.
Yeah.
So that's a whole, separate discussion, but to just inject that for a second there, because we've been talking about this for close to 2 years, and now we're seeing it in the Vegas, odds on the over and under. And then the other part of it too, right, is you're looking at this, we're looking at these schedules, and just as you said, we're looking at these games and we're thinking these are going to be one-score games, field goal, touchdown. One score. They're like the talent, the rosters, looking at it, just kind of, eye test. Yeah, we're probably looking at one-score games. But we all know this is college football, and there are going to be games that really surprise us. The couple that come to mind, A&M and Missouri last year. Nobody thought A&M was going to blow the doors off of Missouri. And then talking about South Carolina blew the doors off of Oklahoma. Nobody expected them to blow the doors off Oklahoma. So there's going to be one or two on this schedule, probably for South Carolina. It could go the opposite direction this year. Yeah. You don't want that to happen, but it could go the opposite direction where you look up and you're like, holy smokes, LSU is putting a 40 spot on South Carolina, and South Carolina has scored 15. They can't move the ball, or they've scored 2 touchdowns. They can't move the ball. It's the middle of the fourth quarter. So there's going to be games like that as well. Where we get into the season and we start to learn more about these teams. But right now, they look like one-score games. Yeah,
they do. So all that to say, we have a fun season ahead of us, as always. And we will close out here. We don't have a Biscuit of the Week. We'll just do a quick plug at the end there. But we do have a must-champ Coach of the Week. So I know you put this together. I will let you take us away.
Okay. This one is kind of ridiculous and is a little bit outside of the typical Muschamp Coach of the Week award mold, but I don't have a video for this one. All I have is a screenshot. I couldn't really find the video. I'm not sure if it's even online, but our Muschamp Coach of the Week for this week, again, let's set the stage here. Remember where we are. We're in the middle of the summer. There's not a whole lot going on. College baseball is done. We've got, college football coming up. We'll definitely have a Coach of the Week from SEC Media Days, which happens in 2 weeks. But for now, we're scrounging and we're trying to figure it out. This week, Bruce Pearl, our Muschamp Coach of the Week, for calling out the Iran supreme leader during the strikes that were taken last week or whenever that was, 2 weeks ago. So Bruce Pearl here. This is Jake at Jake's BBN on Twitter. Jake is saying, what is Bruce Pearl doing on here? And I kind of have to agree. I'm not even getting political here. I don't know what Bruce Pearl is doing on Fox News. I know that he's politically outspoken and has been kind of making some of these rounds before, but absolutely absurd graphic to see Bruce Pearl on Fox News discussing global politics and a strike against Iran. And he's calling out, Bruce Pearl calls out Iran's supreme leader wearing the Auburn gear to boot.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he is trying to run for Senate for Tommy Tuberville's seat because we know that he is retiring, but an absolutely wild graphic to see pop up on Twitter. And we thought, really, because it just, it exemplifies Bruce Pearl's passion on subjects that are even outside of basketball. And we all know that Coach Muschamp was a very passionate coach and continues to be to this day. So that is your Muschamp Coach of the Week for this week, is Bruce Pearl for calling out Iran's supreme leader.
Right. Iran, if you got a problem with Bruce Pearl, you got a problem with America. So
yeah,
get ready.
Yeah. And you got a problem with Toomer's Corner, and we're not having it. And we have toilet paper ready to go in case you need to be bombed by some Charmin.
Right. I'm sure. I don't even know who Iran's supreme leader is, or what their consumption of U.S. media is. But I would have loved to see the reaction of someone showing that to the supreme leader and him just going, "Who is Bruce Pearl? Like, why is this guy, calling me out?" We need one of those on 3 graphics with Bruce Pearl and the Iran supreme leader, and it says calls out.
Yeah, calls out, exactly. And he has a point. I mean, Iran's supreme leader, Iran as a country, has 0 SEC championships.
True.
So
that's correct.
How can they really be talking smoke or be, talking about, hey, we're going to fire missiles at you and you and you, when they don't have any SEC championships, which was called out by many in the SEC Twitter mafia when those strikes were happening. In fact, there was multiple SEC accounts that I saw were replying to accounts like Iran Military News and Supreme Leader of Iran saying, yeah, this doesn't matter because you guys don't have any SEC championships. Totally a fair call out.
Yeah. I mean, spot the lie. So, all right. On that note, we will close it out. Again, we don't have a biscuit, but we're just going to re-shout out our friend Emily of East Texas for these delicious biscuits and gravy from last week. And a quick plug, if you want to be featured on the show, shoot us an email, DM us, or just tag us on Twitter too. If you just post a picture like this one here, just tag us so that we can find it, and we'll be happy to feature you as our biscuit of the week. So I think that does it for tonight. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got a great audience, nearly up to 150 live viewers. So appreciate everybody tuning in, especially as we ran a little bit over tonight, but I'm enjoying the over-under series. We will continue that next week along with whatever news comes about. And then that will be our last show before SEC Media Day starts. So in 2 weeks, we'll have a lot more to talk about with SEC Media Days kicking off on the 14th. So we're getting close. You put it in the newsletter this morning. I think we're 52 days from kickoff. So
week 0. Yep.
The shows are only going to get better as we have slogged through the off season. So once again, thank you to everyone for tuning in along the way, and we can't wait for the season. So hope you will join us for the ride. Appreciate y'all. That will do it. I'm Hammer. That is Bossman. We're out of here.
Thank you, guys.